Hello, and welcome to another Madman restoration video. In this video, I will be refinishing a Swedish rosewood table. Something neat about this table is that it is refinished on both sides. So when you flip over to extend the table, it is a completely different grain pattern. I'm personally not a huge fan of Danish or Swedish furniture, however I do love rosewood, and the veneer on this piece is excellent. So I guess that makes me an oxymoron. To start, I taped the edges. In hindsight, I don't remember why I did this, but I did. Since this table has two tops, I'm going to spray QCS on the smaller version first. And if you use promo code MADMAN, you get 10% off your entire strip well order. I'm using QCS on this table because not only do I love it, but I am currently using it indoors and I do not need to worry about ventilation from harsh fumes. After the QCS has sat for about 30 minutes, I remove it by using my scraper. If you look here, you can see there is some white residue left on the table. That is leftover finish that is not removed yet. The finish was very stubborn to remove, which makes me think it was a polyester finish. Polyester finishes are not the most common, and they are notoriously difficult to remove. Next, I wipe the whole piece down with acetone to remove the stripper and clear up the table. After a couple rounds of QCS, this is what the top looks like. Next, I hand sand the top with 150 grit sandpaper. Then I flip the top and do the whole thing over again. But this time I decided to do something different. I used a razor blade to scrape the old finish off while the QCS was still on the table. When I'm done scraping, I wipe the whole top off with acetone. The finish on the legs is in good shape, so for them I'm going to scrub them the green Scotch-Brite pad and naphtha. My first step in finishing is to use shellac. I am concerned that there may be silicone contamination on the table, so shellac will provide a barrier when I spray my lacquer top coats. I'd hate to go through all this work just to find out there was silicone contamination on there, so I am spraying shellac to be safe.
Hold up, hey.
Next, I scuff the shellac with 320 grit sandpaper and repeat this process twice. Next, it's time to spray vinyl sealer. The ratio is pretty standard: 70% vinyl sealer, 30% lacquer thinner, and a splash of blush retarder. I get asked this a lot, but you do not need an HVLP sprayer to use these products. Mohawk sells vinyl sealer and lacquer in ready-to-use aerosol cans. When the vinyl sealer has dried, I scuff with 320 grit sandpaper and I repeat this process 2 times. Now that the small section of the table is done, I flip it to the large side and I spray vinyl sealer there, following the same process of vinyl sealer and scuffing with 320 grit sandpaper. Now that vinyl sealer is done, it's time to address the color issue. It may be hard to see here. It is not a shadow, but if you look closely, the middle of this skirt is darker than the sides. The color in the middle is the original color, and the color on the sides are lighter from what I would guess would be UV light. When creating your own toner, it's good to have a color wheel on hand. Using a color wheel helps decide what dye stain you need to get your desired color. For this piece, I'm going to use a little cordovan and raw umber. However, cordovan is discontinued, but I do have modern mahogany, which is very close. To make my own toner, I pour out some lacquer thinner in a container. Then I measure out my dye stain to the correct ratio that was on the color wheel. I start with modern mahogany and then raw umber. Then I use a paint stick to mix and determine if the color is to my satisfaction. Here is the area I was talking about that is darker than the rest of the skirt. The goal is to gently bring the piece to match the existing color. And you can see it only takes a little bit of toner to make a big difference to even the color out. The small version of the table was lighter than the larger version of the table. This is probably because the small version was used and was lightened over time by UV light. So I'm going to use the same toner to match the rest of the piece. Now that the toner is applied, it's time to use my matte pre-cat lacquer top coats. After a few minutes, when the first coat has dried, I scuff with 320 grit sandpaper and spray lacquer again. Now there's nothing left but the finished results. This piece did turn out beautiful, and I love matte lacquer on Rosewood and teak. The new owner loved it too because they spent $3,000 for this table. Please like and subscribe and follow my Instagram for more mid-century modern restorations.